Okay, so I'm going to go over some examples here of converting from pseudocode to Visual Basic. It seems like some of us are still having a bit of trouble with that. So I've made up a little chart kind of breaking down exactly which commands are available in Visual Basic given kind of what the pseudocode is asking us to do. So you can sort of see pretty quickly here, print, anytime you see the word print, you're looking to put a message box or a label on the screen. Or if it's a situation where you're getting information, the input box will allow you to print the information and get at the same time. To get information, we need to use an input box or a text box. Anytime it says to make something equal, down here, CPP equals, IT or iTax equals, net equals. So anytime we have that situation, we need to dim the value as whatever the appropriate variable type is, and then we can use the equation often as written. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of work to do, but the math equations will always be pretty straightforward. Something equals what would we normally do? In this case, area equals length times width. If, else, if, and else exist in Visual Basic already, and pretty much in every language. So as soon as you see that you're trying to make a decision, you'll know that it'll be an if statement, and you just have to know how to write the if statement. Essentially, you can look that up on the class notes. Do while and do number of times. These are looping concepts. We haven't gotten there yet, but you will see eventually there's a do loop, and with it you can use until, you can use while. And there's a for loop, which specifically runs a certain number of times. So we won't worry about those for now, but just sort of, if you ever do see pseudocode, you'll know that when it says do while or until, that's exactly what you're using. If it says do this for 5 times, do this 8 times, you're using a for loop. So what I'm going to do is basically just go through these sort of 3 examples on the sheet. The first one we kind of already posted solutions to, but I'll let you sort of watch me go through it. I've got my Visual Studio open here. I'm going to create a new project. And for those of you who haven't started doing it, start naming your projects immediately. Basically, I don't want to see a bunch of Windows Application 1, Windows Application 2 in your folder. One of the things you should be working on is making sure that things are easily found so that you can then refer back to them later on. And so in this case, I'm just going to call it Pseudocode Examples. And actually, I'm going to call it 3C Pseudocode Examples so that I remember it was for your class. Now, I'll be honest, this video might be a little long because I'm going to go through sort of the various steps. Feel free to kind of fast forward and refer back as you need to, but I think it's important that you sort of see some of the things we're going to be doing here. So the first example, basically looking to get the person's age and establish whether they're legal driving age and so on. In this case, if I look at my first 2 steps, print how old are you and get the age. When I come back up, I can use a message box or a label to print how old are you on the screen. But again, because I'm going to be getting the information next, the input box kind of serves a double purpose here. So that will be my choice. I'm going to put a button on the screen, and normally I would rename the button. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that, but again, it's a habit you need to get into immediately. And so I'm going to need an age. Ages are integer values. So an age does not have decimals. Integer means does not have decimals. In order to get the information, I can use either a text box or an input box. In this case, I'm going to use the input box, just a little bit more convenient for me at this moment. And then when I look at what the code actually asks me to do, after I get the age, it asks me to check to see if the age is greater than 70. And of course, we know that there is an if statement, and so I can literally type that same thing. And the computer helps me out by sticking then on the end. In Visual Basic, I need to have the word then there, and the computer knows that, so it helps. And basically now I'm going to, The next thing it asks me to do is print. You have to retake your driver's license for people who are greater than 70 years old. And so you have to retake your license this year. The second thing it asks me to check to see is, assuming the person is not over 70, the computer will then step down to this step here. Remember, the way the if statement works is it looks at the first option first and then moves on to the second option. And so else if age is greater than 16, and I will write again exactly that. And now I remember that I need the word then, so the computer lets me do that. I'll have a different message for this one. You are legal driving age. And then I basically just follow that same situation, else if, followed by an else, will let me finish up what I've got here. So example 2, write code to calculate the employee's net pay from their gross pay, assuming that all employees lose blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I know that this is my pseudocode. I need to get the gross pay and then do these various calculations. This one I'm going to go ahead and set up this form. So give me a second while I do that. Okay, so I've got my form set up here. A couple of things before I go any further. This text box is one that the user will have to type into. And so I'm going to call it txt gross pay. I want the name to be very meaningful so that anytime I see it, I know what it is. This button, probably pretty important for me as well. I'm going to call it button net pay. And this list box is where I'm going to display everything. So I'm going to call it LST payslip. Now this label here and these labels here, I'm not adjusting in my program at all. This is just going to say type in your gross pay, so I'm not going to worry about renaming it. But the ones that I actually have to access and do some work with, I want to have meaningful names. So now, once I click on the button, I'm going to be looking to get information off the screen. In this case, specifically, I need to get the gross pay, and it will be a single value. And I'm going to get the gross pay from that text box on the screen. And the reason, of course, I name it the way I do is because I know that it's a text box. As soon as I type txt, I will only see my text boxes. And so even though I didn't remember what the name of it was, I can go ahead and just see down or pick it off the list. And of course, it's the text value from that I want to get. So this is the first step, get the gross pay. Again, those are the two things I need to be able to do, dim the variable and then pull the information off the screen. As we've sort of said a few times now, what's on here is this is just an interface to get the information back and forth. This is not part of my program. This is allowing them to type in the information so that when I come into here, I can grab it, I can do all my work in here, and then I can send the information back out. So after I get the gross pay, I have to calculate the income tax, the CPP, and the net pay. And so I will need variables for those three things. The income tax, and it will be a single value again. I need the CPP value, again, single value because it can have decimals, and I need the net pay, which is the actual amount of money I take home. Now, even if I don't understand that, it doesn't really matter. The idea is that all I'm really doing is programming in exactly what I've been asked to program in. If I didn't know exactly how these things worked, it wouldn't matter. Income tax is 29%, and so I'm going to calculate that. And it says 29 out of 100 times whatever the gross pay was. The CPP value is going to be, I think it was 2.7, I said, 2.7 out of 100. So again, 2.7% times the gross pay. And again, stressing the fact that even if I don't understand how this works, all I have to do is find a way to code it. And these lines are basically exactly what needs to be typed into the computer. Gross pay can't be written exactly that way. My variable cannot have spaces in it, but otherwise I could have called it gross pay, one word, GPay in this case, gross, something again that is meaningful is all I'm really interested in. And now my net pay is going to be my gross pay minus the other two things. And I need to print those 4 pieces of information out. Now, the list box allows me to print multiple items, and so this is what I wanted to use it for. Gross pay. And something you won't have used yet, but I will use, VB tab. Just allows me to space things out nicely on my screen, in the list box specifically. Oops. And now we'll run it. Let's assume my gross pay is $450. Calculate, and you can see that it's made some attempt here. Doesn't look great. The spacing's not ideal, so I'm going to see if I can fix that up. Basically what's happened is the way the tab works is it sends the code over to the next available space, whatever the next available space happens to be. Because these words are a little longer, these ones are forced over a little further. And so let's try this again. And again, not too bad. We've got sort of the information here, but it doesn't look quite right yet still. So we'd like to get this looking a little bit better. And this is just an option that you'll see at some point. I'm going to format as currency. And now hopefully this one will look better. I didn't give myself enough room for that big a number. All right, last time. Fix it up here, make this wider so that it actually fits the information that I'm trying to put on it. I could also obviously make my font a little smaller. And now I see the information looks pretty much the way I was looking to. And for those of you that aren't sure, what this says is, this says when I earned $425, so when my boss tells me he's going to pay me $425, what actually goes into my bank account is $290.28. Kind of lousy. Now the final example here, I'm not going to actually have you watch me go through, I'll just sort of put it on the screen, but just again, thinking it through, it says print, choose this, get user's choice. So this tells me right off the bat, I need to use an input box or allow the person to type into a text box, maybe with a label beside it, 1 for rock, 2 for paper, or 3 for scissors. I then need to get a choice from the computer. It's a fairly straightforward choice. In this case, it's a random number 1 to 3. We've done this a few times. Obviously, if you don't know how to do that, you can ask. That's pretty simple. And then depending on what the user has chosen and what the computer has randomly chosen, it will determine whether it's a tie, a win, and so on. So I'm going to go ahead and write this one up. But again, the key is to recognize now print get user's choice means input right away. I'm going to get an input box, or I'm using a label with a text box combination. This is a calculation that needs to be done, so I'll have to dim a computer's choice and then get the random number. And then I do the comparisons with the if statement. So I'll be right back with the final product. Okay, so we're back. Here is the pseudocode again. Just a reminder, we need to do an input box or something to get the user's choice. We need to randomly generate the computer's choice and then need to compare them. Essentially, this is what we're looking at. We need to store the user's choice. It's going to be an integer value, 1, 2, 3. There's going to be a computer choice that will also be an integer value, 1, 2, or 3. This randomize is something you may not have seen yet. Randomize just guarantees that from one running of the program to the next, I'll have more random values instead of just kind of getting a patterned value. Not a big deal. Just use randomize whenever you're going to use random numbers. And here's the equation for getting random numbers. In this case, I'm getting a random number between 1, this value on the end, and 3. Essentially what you will learn eventually is that the last value, the 1 in this case, is the smallest number I can get, and the 3 is the number of possibilities. So not too important at this point, but that's how the random number equation works. And now basically this says if the two values are the same, regardless of what they are, if they're both 1s, they're both 2s, or they're both 3s, we have a tie. If the user chooses 1, so rock, and computer chooses 2, my paper covers your rock, I win. I'm talking now as the computer here. And then so on. You can sort of see the various choices you have. There's essentially 6 possibilities where somebody is the winner or the loser, depending on who gets which one. And I actually forgot to reword one of these. It looks like I win, you win, you win, I win, I win, you win. No, that's right. And so when you run the program, I'm going to choose rock to start, and it says my paper covers your rock, I win. And choose rock again, my paper covers your rock. I'm going to choose rock again. We have a tie. Yes! 1 for 4, got a tie. I'm happy with that. So essentially now I'm done kind of going through pseudocode. Hopefully with a little more practice you'll become comfortable with it. It's certainly important to be able to make those moves because, again, in the next set of assignments, sort of once we get into the actual course content a little bit more, your job will be to write this code. You'll have to kind of plan it out ahead of time and then write it without the steps being broken down for you. I wish you well.